Shabbat Shalom. This is Daniel John Lee with Torah Restoration Ministries. The website is www.spiritandtorah.com. This is episode 44, my weekly Shabbat Shalom podcast. And my podcast today is going to take a departure from the typical teaching podcast that I normally do, because I want to discuss something that's been going on in the news last several weeks, actually, and I just thought I would touch upon it since the date is fast approaching, and that is November 9th, 2011. So there's been a lot of talk on different prophecy websites and even on the mainstream news about this date. People wondering, is November 9th, 2011 going to be significant in terms of something major happening? As the graphic on the podcast indicates, the first major thing that's going to be occurring on November 9, 2011, for about 30 seconds at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, is an emergency alert system that is nationwide. And the government has said that this is just a standard test that they're doing, although this is the first time that they've ever activated the emergency alert system nationwide. It's going to basically shut down all television and radio stations and channels and communications for 30 seconds and send out an emergency broadcast. So that has a lot of people sort of wondering what that's all about, because this is the first time anything like this has ever happened. Originally, it was going to be, I think, 2.5 or maybe 3.5 minutes, but they decided to shorten it to 30 seconds because they were afraid people might panic when the TV and radio were not working, and instead we're all covered with this emergency broadcast. So that's kind of interesting. On the same day, November 9th, 2011, we are supposedly, and I don't have anything to really verify this, but supposedly we are supposed to, the planet Earth is supposed to pass into the debris trail of a comet, Elenin, which I'm sort of confused about. I thought it was supposed to be a comet that was supposed to pass by or near Earth back around the Feast of Trumpets, which would have been late September, but now there's all this information that says we're supposed to pass within the debris trail on November 9th. And then there's other stories about a comet slamming into either the moon or the Earth on or about November 9th, 2011. So that's sort of interesting that these two events, the comets and this emergency broadcast system, coincide. And then, which is something I mentioned in a podcast in the summer, and that is that as early as 2008, there were plans drawn up by FEMA and by the federal government to deploy 20,000 U.S. troops throughout the United States by September of 2011. And so the obvious question is, well, why would the government need so many troops on American soil in late 2011? So far, nothing has happened since September to indicate that there would be a need for this many troops. There's a few other stories, too, that aren't quite as well known. There's a story about an anthrax vaccine that the government is distributing, but there's only a limited supply. I think there's 300 million Americans, but as far as the anthrax vaccine viruses, the anthrax vaccines go, there's only like 44 million. So there's been speculation on a lot of these news stories about, well, who will actually get the anthrax vaccines and how will that be decided? Is it going to be through a lottery or only given to the privileged, or how is that decided? Of course, I would highly encourage everyone not to get any type of vaccine ever, as it's bad science and you don't want to inject yourself with stuff like that. So there's quite a few stories that are just sort of all pointing toward this date, November 9th, 2011. And then just last night, as I was opening up Shabbat with some dear friends of mine, we came across a video that we had actually come across this time last year, and it's a Bart Simpson video or cartoon. Back in 1996, The Simpsons had a cartoon that sort of, it actually pretty well accurately predicted the 9/11 disaster that happened in 2001. And in this 1996 cartoon, they show the dates of 9/11, and then they show a plane hitting these towers, and it's pretty mind blowing. So ever since then, people have thought that the Illuminati or the powers that be try to embed codes about what's going to happen, at least in terms of false flags or disasters, into the show The Simpsons. Well, there was a show in, I think it was May of 2010, that has the words, there's not enough time for a full countdown, and then there's this dramatic nuclear explosion that occurs, like a mushroom cloud. And then you see Homer Simpson, Bart's dad, on this hammock, and right next to the hammock you see this clock, and on the clock face there's the two hands pointing toward 6 and 11. And so a lot of people theorized last year, this means something's going to happen on November 6th of 2010. Well, of course, nothing happened, and then people thought, well, maybe something's going to happen on November 9th, 2010, because if you turn everything upside down, then it would be November 9th, and of course, nothing happened. So now I'm just wondering if this clock might be actually pointing toward this year, that something's going to happen on 11/9 that's going to be significant. So I don't really know, but it was just something that we were discussing and sort of pondering about. I do know that this time last year on November 3rd, me and a woman on my prayer team, we both had a very deep shaking in our presence. And in fact, I posted a podcast on this about a year ago where I had the 4 horses of the apocalypse and discussed this shaking and then the coming financial collapse that I believe is still on the horizon, but very, very very, very near. So there is something about November that and then here's another thing, and this is something that I think I can share. I'm not going to disclose who shared this with me because I haven't asked his permission, but I think I can disclose what he said. And there's a man who's involved in a very well-respected messianic ministry that I know and I talk to often, and he shared with me last winter that that Yahweh had told him that there was going to come some future year in which, in the month of November, he and his family were going to be directed to leave the country, leave the United States, and get out. And that he didn't know what year it was going to be, but he knew it was going to be in the month of November. So there was another thing pointing toward November. So there's a lot of things that are sort of pointing toward this month and toward this date. Is anything amazing or extraordinary or major going to happen on November 9th? I really don't know. I can't say. All I can say is that there's a lot of buzz right now on the internet about this date. And so I think it'll be interesting to see if anything does actually happen. Maybe nothing will happen. Maybe this is all a bunch of hype, and it'll just come and go, and it'll just be a national emergency alert system test, and then that'll be it. It'll last 30 seconds. That'll be it. Television and radio will be back up like normal, and people will even forget about this date. I don't know, but I just thought it would be good to make a podcast about this because there's just so many different news stories and so many different people talking about this date, not only in the prophecy circles but also in the mainstream media. I've seen this. I've seen this article pop up in the Drudge Report, and there's even been announcements made here in Portland, Oregon, where I live, publicly about this nationwide broadcast that's coming to try to, encourage people not to panic. So I think that's pretty interesting. So anyway, we will see if anything happens this upcoming Wednesday, November 9th, 2011, and no matter what, just make sure you keep your eyes on Yahweh. And I forgot one other major story. I don't have a lot of time now, but there's also a story I read where there's supposed to be a major solar flare, a super solar flare that's supposed to occur around November 9th. And the last time this happened was back in the 1800s, and when it happened, it knocked out telegraph lines. It caused auroras as far south as Hawaii, and it was a major thing. So the speculation is if this is going to be another super solar flare, that it could potentially knock out the northern half of the electric grid of the United States. So, is that what's going to happen? Well, I don't know. We'll see. But Yah bless you. Keep close to YahShua, and have a great Shabbat.